Hi, I'm Sarah Vittora McLaughlin Antithesis. Every hour, a human is successfully mind-controlled somewhere in front of a screen. They suffer, alone and terrified, waiting for someone. Please, say you're the answer for these innocent, suffering human beings. They need your help, and this is your chance. Make no mistake, just $1 a month from you. Yes, you. Becomes more than finances. It becomes action and intention behind a movement combating misused occult forces and giving a voice to those unheard by too many. Your support on any level becomes greater energy and raises frequencies. Even simple reviewing and sharing of the show. It's about energy and willingness. Grimerica.com/support.
Okay, guys, we're here for a very rare on-scene sort of Grimerica. This is our first time ever trying this, actually. If you don't count Paradigm Symposium. We did a bit at Paradigm Symposium. We did a bit there, but...
and we've done some of the cabin and stuff like that, too, like when we go away.
Not with video, though.
Not with video.
No.
That's right.
We brought Brody along with us. And, of course, we're here because past guest, Jamie Janover, I should have checked which episode it was.
It was 164, I think.
Was
it?
2
years ago, almost to the day. 2 years ago.
Of course, 64 is in there.
Was that when you were born?
Does that follow you around?
Well, 64 is fundamental to the geometry of space-time.
Really? Nice.
Oh, perfect.
There we go.
Yeah.
I like it.
64 tetrahedrons are needed to start to see this fractal octavization of perfectly balanced geometry, known as the vector equilibrium.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah. That's the what's his name? The buckyball is 64 sides, isn't it? Or
I'm not sure about buckyball.
Well, now we'll have to have you on for every 64.
There's different buckyballs, different types and sizes, so I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
But 64 tetrahedrons is the first 2 octaves of perfect balanced geometry.
Oh wow!
Nice. The cube octahedrons is 2 cube octahedrons nested inside of each other. So 64 is found all over the place. We have 64 codons in our DNA. You have 64 cells before they start to bifurcate and become different types of cells.
Even audio, right? Because when it pops into my head right away is when I encode this podcast episode, I have the option of 64, 128, 196, 320, or however that works.
Computer memory, like the Commodore 64, 64 bits is fundamental in the way computer memory works. And there's 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, and it goes on and on.
Wow.
There you go.
So
there you go. So 32 should be the magic number.
32 is also significant because of half of the division of 64, but and octavization in general, like 8, 64, 32, all those.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. And I like how so 33 is not the magic number. Is there anything there?
I don't know about that. That could be somehow fractally related, some proportion of it, but
it's like tool timing.
So we're here at TELUS Convention Center in Calgary, and you're presenting tomorrow for a few hours, right?
Yeah, I do a 4-hour download on the entire universe in a nutshell.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's my job.
Well, we'll be here. We're looking forward to that. That starts at 2 o'clock tomorrow. I'm going to try and get this out tonight. So if you are in Calgary and you didn't hear about it yet, I think there was still like 15 tickets available when I was on the website and grabbed them. So there's still a few seats open. And of course, Jamie did mention he is going to be in Colorado, Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, I'm Denver next Sunday, the 6th.
Okay. So I know we've got a ton of listeners in the Denver area. I know Salvatore's down there. And a couple other people out of the chat, so you guys should make sure you head on over. Graham will put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, is that the same thing as this?
Yeah, it's at the Mercury Cafe. It's a 4-hour synopsis of Nassim Haramein, his unified field theory. He's a physicist, and so it's basically the description of the universe at all scales, cosmological to quantum, how it's all connected, how it's all one thing.
It's like a new relativity.
It's taking Einstein's equations and adding to it. He added spin to Einstein's equations because Einstein talked about space-time curvature, but it's not just curving, it's curling, like water going down the drain, right? When you pull the plug out of your bathtub. The water doesn't just vortex straight down. It spins as it goes.
That's right. So is that the same sort of, could that be the same sort of comparison as to like, I've been watching a lot of models on YouTube lately about the vortex solar system and more how the solar system would probably actually look to an outside observer traveling through space compared to how, you know, we learn in school that it's just sort of this static thing that's everything spinning around, but actually that thing that's going through the middle is fucking flying through space at whatever speed, and it's sort of dragging all of us behind it.
Yeah, the Earth is making a helix as it moves through the galaxy.
That's right.
It's not making a circle because the sun is moving very fast. Something like 300 kilometers a second or something like that. I can't remember the exact, but it's very rapid.
Yeah, so it's almost like the Goldilocks zone becomes more of a drag, you know, how close you're getting dragged behind it as opposed to, you know, where you just randomly end it.
Yeah, I would say it's not really that you're being dragged because the planets are orbiting the equator of the sun. They're orbiting as the sun is moving, so the whole thing is moving. It's kind of like when the Earth is spinning, it's also spinning the atmosphere with it.
Yeah.
The sun is moving and all the planets are moving with it. It's not like behind it. It's not like trailing off behind.
So they're kind of, you picture it more as like the whole thing is sort of stuck inside that same sort of gravity, like when you're on a plane or something like that.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah. And then the plane of the planets moving with the sun is not at a 90-degree angle to the motion of the sun. It's at a 60-degree angle.
That's right.
The ecliptic, the plane of orbits is at an angle. And then, of course, the sun itself is also spiraling, but it's a very long, gradual spiral, and it takes millions of years to do a spiral because it's spiraling away along one of the arms of the galaxy.
What is it that... What is the sun? What's the sun cycle? That is it the 12 years or
there's an 11-year cycle where it's more activity and less activity, and it's pretty regular. We've been observing it for quite a while.
Is that related to that same sort of? Is that somehow built into that slow spiral?
I don't think so. I don't know that the spiral rate is related to the sun cycle, but they have to be connected somehow. But I don't think that there necessarily is causation or that it's directly related.
Like
or I haven't heard about that, I should say.
I wonder if it's
maybe
like,
it is.
Because I pictured it sort of as like the tick on the 72 years of the great year sort of thing, you know, being like, what does that work out to exactly 1 degree or something like that?
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to know if that 11 years ended up factoring as to, you know, somehow into 360 degrees.
Right.
Those numbers always seem to surprise you when you run them and you're like, wait, what?
Yep.
So, do you run into a lot of that in your work then? Numbers that probably shouldn't line up that do?
To a certain degree, there is definitely an underlying fundamental reality where the numbers all relate. And there's actually a great course in the Resonance Academy, the online course that was built by the Resonance Science Foundation. That's Nassim Haramein's foundation, Resonance Science Foundation, and there's a course called The Etymology of Number by this guy Robert Grant, and he is revealing some very profound interconnections between numbers, and especially vortex math and writing numbers in a circle. When you start to map things out in terms of a circle, then all this geometry comes out.
Would that include like even like say doing like a cycle track or something like that, like writing, say you were writing a daily journal or something like that? Is there any benefit to sort of having that in a circle?
I'd say there's probably a benefit to having anything that you do in a circle because it's such a foundational pattern of the universe. And the universe, if you had to say, what's the universe doing? You can only tell me one thing. It's making spheres. And the circle is the flat sphere basically. But yeah, if you map things to spheres, then it starts to reveal another level of detail of the reality.
So do you get into your last trip to Egypt at all in your presentation? Was that, and that number guy was there, wasn't he?
Yeah, Robert Grant was with us in Egypt. We do an annual trip every year with the Resonance Academy. The first annual was last October, We went to Egypt, and this fall we're going to Peru. And we explored some really cool sites that most tourists don't get to go, and we talked about alternative theories to the predominant theory of Egyptologists, which will say that the pharaohs built the pyramids and that Khufu was the guy who built the Great Pyramid. And we learned a lot of alternative information to that, and I go into great detail in my presentations relating the physics and the geometry of space-time to ancient civilizations and them encoding this information in their documents and their monuments and their traditions.
Do you have a favorite sort of alternative theory to the pyramids? I know my favorite has always been that they were some sort of a seed bank. Like, I think those sarcophaguses were like filled with seeds and shit to start up the new world after the flood.
The predominant theory, I think the one that makes the most sense is probably what's kind of known as the Giza power plant, that it was an energy device of some kind.
I like that one a lot too.
And it was either harnessing electrical energy or it was using gas, various types of gases, or it was using water that came up from the aquifers that are under the pyramid. And that's the same thing that we see in other places where there's pyramids, that there's aquifers. And Nikola Tesla was using that same principles with Wardenclyffe Tower, with building his tower underneath aquifers, because moving water, as we know, creates electrical charge. And so you can harness that electrical charge from the earth and concentrate it. And so there's elaborate theories showing that, like, maybe the Great Pyramid was a water hammer of sorts, like when you turn off your water in your house and you hear that bang, because the column of water is stopping, because you can't compactify water, you can't squish it and make it smaller, and so it just stops, like, you know, like a solid. And so maybe there was a water hammer type of action in there. Maybe gas was accumulating and going up into the chambers, and maybe it was like made to ionize water to charge it so that you could use it to irrigate your crops and then grow much more food for your civilization. It could have been like that it was creating an energy beam that comes out of the tip of the pyramid that
destroys planets.
Yeah, it helps to ground the planet, and maybe it was like a beacon for like being able to see where you want to come in if you're flying from
like
the
a landing.
outside.
Yeah. It definitely doesn't seem to be for burying a dead king.
No, that has been debunked big time. Khufu, the only statue found of Khufu is 3 inches tall.
That's right, and it looked like the paint was much older, right? I think they eventually ended up, I don't know if it's official yet, but from what I've heard, that whole Khufu thing was based on basically, you know, graffiti from however long ago.
Yeah, there was an anthropologist that was one of the first ones to start to really go deep in investigating the pyramid, and there's the theory that he forged the cartouche of the Khufu's name. The cartouche is like the hieroglyphics written in a pill-shaped oval, which is kind of like your name, your label that you would put on stuff, and he misspelled it, or he spelled it a way that is different than the way that they would actually spell it back in the day, because there's different ways to write the name. So that's the theory, is that he basically forged that so that he could be like, look, I discovered this important thing, and I'm the guy who discovered it, that kind of thing.
And hasn't it been discovered that a lot of these megalithic structures are above water aquifers as well?
Quite a bit, yeah, and even cathedrals in Europe, the altar at the end of the cathedral are oftentimes underneath underground water passages and stuff. So
that's throwing out the 2,500-year-old date, obviously, or 2,500 BC. Or do you think there could still be something to that date? I mean,
no, they're throwing that out.
It seems like there's no one that had the capability at that time. It had to be a lot earlier.
Yeah, and it's probable that Khufu was like, I love this thing, and therefore I want you to put my boat next to this, you know. And King Ramses II was prolific at, you know, carving off the name of somebody else and then putting his name on things. And so there's all these statues all over the place. Oh, another statue of King Ramses II, and another one. And it's basically because he went around and put his name on stuff. It doesn't mean he made it. And so that's what's happening, I think, is with the pyramids, is that the Egyptians found the pyramids and said, wow, this is epic. Let's try to do this. And then they tried to emulate it, and they started off with like very basic pyramids, like the one at Saqqara, and then they did the bent pyramid, and they did the red pyramid. And it's probable that the oldest ones are the Great Pyramid, and then they got less advanced.
As they sort of lost the knowledge.
They lost the technology or the knowledge.
So Ramses is like the Walt Disney of the last.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and that fits in with the Sphinx, like all the theories about the Sphinx and how the erosion is showing that it's way older than we thought. So we're talking about now going before the Ice Age, probably. Back before that, is that what some are talking about?
Yeah. Robert Schoch got into trouble because he was invited to present his work at a convention of his peers, and they kind of shot him down because he dared to say the Sphinx was twice as old than commonly thought. He wanted to say it was like 6 times older,
right.
But he knew he would get in real trouble for going that far.
So even going back till after the Ice Age was bad enough.
Yeah, even saying 10,000 years ago was big because that's like right after the last Ice Age. But he's saying that the water erosion on the back of the Sphinx and on the enclosure around the Sphinx is water erosion, and he knows that really well because he's a geologist from Boston University. And John Anthony West was the one who introduced him to this whole thing. And now, because they found Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, now we have evidence of another site that's super advanced,
buried right at that same time in history.
Yeah, and at the time when he first did his theory on the Sphinx, there was no evidence of an ancient culture making megalithic structures 10,000 to 13,000 years ago. Now we have Göbekli Tepe, and it's 12,000 to 13,000 carbon dated. And we also have Garang Parang, the pyramid in Indonesia, in Java, that's been carbon dated to like 22,000 years and advanced. So I think more and more, the more we dig, literally, we uncover more and more, and it becomes more and more mysterious, and we have to rewrite all the history books.
Well, it really seems like they're going to find a connection because, I mean, when I look at the statues on Easter Island, the ones they've excavated, right to the bottom, and I look at the pillars from Göbekli Tepe, I mean, to me, it's undeniable that that's some sort of, they might not have been the exact same culture, but they learned from the same book because there's a lot of crossover in the way the relief carved and just the way the fingers of things looks, and some of the shaping's the same, and I think it's undeniable that there's some sort of crossover there. Yeah,
no doubt, like a global culture that was informed by one super ancient culture, and then there was the cataclysm that happened 12,800 years ago when a comet broke up in our solar system, and fragments spewed all the way across Canada and the United States, starting from like past Vancouver Island all the way across, and then all the way across the northern Atlantic into Europe, and there's fragments found as far as Jordan and Iraq.
Yeah, I heard actually that this year, by the end of the year, there's supposed to be up to 6 studies coming out from the Comet Research Group that Graham Hancock's aligned with, and that they're all going to start lending credence to not only exactly that, but to that being the reason the Ice Age ended when it did.
So dramatically, dude.
And also the basically the birth of every flood myth that has been traced back to, I think, the last time I checked, it was 730 some different cultures with a separate flood myth.
Yeah, it makes sense. There must have been one if they all say there was.
Yeah, and I mean, the interesting thing is we've had Randall Carlson on a bunch of times specifically to talk about these ancient cataclysms, and he says the exact same thing, that the Ice Age ended because we got hit by a bunch of rocks 12,800 years ago.
It got accelerated.
And that's what,
because of it, but
that's what caused
the Younger Dryas.
The Younger Dryas was caused by that. So, I mean, and that's something that we've come around to, I think, through probably 4, 5, 6 of our guests now that are all sort of lining up with these things. And then I've heard that this research is supposed to come out this year. So that's actually starting to look like something that could happen in our lifetime.
Oh yeah.
Do you have hope for that?
Of what?
Of maybe accepting some of the work of these guys like yourself and Hancock and these guys that are saying, look, we were around forever ago. This isn't the first.
It's already being accepted, I think.
Yeah, it's
not by maybe the most mainstream, but the evidence is so piling up. It's gonna.
I want to hear Shermer say it.
It's going to come around. I think that's happening across the board with all disciplines. I mean, so many of the things that I was told when I was a kid turned out to be absolutely wrong, like super duper wrong.
Yeah, embarrassingly.
Not just a little bit wrong. And so I feel like almost an obligation to go out and spread the next level of understanding. Because like if we already know that the Earth isn't making a circle around the sun, you don't need to flatten out that model.
That's right.
And show it to a kid. You know, we still show kids models of gravity where you show the Earth making a dimple, you know, in a fabric. And in that example, gravity is flat. Like gravity is not a flat surface that's being dimpled by a sphere. I mean, that's the picture you'll show the kids, but you don't need to flatten gravity.
No, you know, that video I could see being useful to somebody much older than a kid if they're having trouble catching that concept. But when you show that to a kid, they sort of lock that in as moving forward, and instead of using it as a tool, they're using it as the end all be all.
Think about how much time and energy and money we spent to make the movie Avatar, and we don't have a basic animation showing the relative motion of our local environment that we show all preschool kids. Like, here's what a year is. A year is one rotation of a helix, not a circle going around the sun. Like, we're flattening ideas and making them simple when the kids are ready to tell us what's up. They're evolving faster than the adults.
Yeah, and by the way, can't keep up. Even if they wanted to keep them up, they can't keep up.
Made up by a double helix.
Well, yeah, they're all. Every planet is making different size helixes because they're different periods.
So that's fucking crazy. That's gotta like how can you not take that? Because how can you not take that and equate that to some sort of grand design?
Well, then you got to start defining what you mean by grand design.
I like to leave it there just because when you go any further, I find you can get into that. I mean, I look at it as anything from a simulation to, I mean, that would be my end of the spectrum where other people would probably call it God. But I mean, when you start to see these different patterns and numbers and movements and everything else, I mean, and then they're inside the human body are doing the same things, and it becomes pretty hard to deny that it's, you know, it's, I mean, it's not A, that it's all connected, and B, that, you know, someone was using the same sort of brush.
Yeah, we got into trouble because back before we invented the scientific method, everybody was kind of using their intuition and had faith and, you know, spiritual kind of religious information that informed them. And then we started collecting data and invented the scientific method and came up with the idea of hypotheses and, you know, matching data to hypotheses and all this. And then when the scientists started to show this structure and like this grand design, then the religious people would say, aha, you just proved that God exists. And the scientists were like, wait, we don't want to be mystics. We're not spiritual. We want finite numbers. We want real data. We're scientists. We're not mystics. And so this dichotomy was born where science said, oh, no. It's all just random. The universe is super random. It's just a bunch of stuff flying around. And because it existed for such a long time, that eventually it organized itself. And that's how life evolved, is because there was this primordial soup, and then the lightning bolt hit the surface of the soup and energized the soup. I mean, you remember getting told this story when we were kids, that life just formed on this planet because we were lucky that over a long time, lots of molecules happened to come together by chance.
Yeah, 1 in a billion could happen 14 times.
Yeah, and it's obvious that it wasn't by chance. And so we got into this whole weird thing where it's like either you're religious and you believe God organized all this stuff, or you're a scientist and you think it's random. But now the science is proving that it's not random, that there is some crazy, you could call it a grand design, I guess. I would just call it that the universe has a very specific organization to it, and we've started to figure out what that is. And it's, you know, the one thing that connects all things in the whole universe is the space. And so you're like, okay, well, what's up with the space? Is the space random, or does the space have structure? And so you're like, okay, well, let's figure out, is there structure in space? Wait, what's the study of structure in space called? Geometry, right? So then the question is, what is the geometry of the fabric of the vacuum? What's the geometry of space-time? And when you start to find that out, then you realize, oh, It's tetrahedral. And if you put a sphere around each one of those tetrahedrons, it's an infinite scalar 3D flower of life. Flower of life symbol is the fundamental pattern of the quantum vacuum fluctuations that make up the proton.
And it's also the building blocks of the building block of sacred geometry.
Well, that's why it's sacred. It's sacred, quote unquote, sacred geometry, because it's the most foundational pattern that makes up everything. Because like all of your atoms are made of, these little protons in the nuclei, and the protons are made up of 10 to the 60 Planck spherical units, these little spherical oscillations. And when those spherical oscillations perfectly overlap and there's no space between them, you get that little, Vesica Pisces petal shape, and it's in 3D, but we're talking 3D flower of life is the fundamental organization of protons, which is the organization of atoms, which make molecules, which makes you.
Is that Vesica Pisces? Is that what the one that's considered the seed of life?
Seed of life is more like a bunch of circles, the whole thing. The Vesica Pisces is where the circles would overlap.
Where they start to
like a little petal shape, but it would be a 3D petal shape. There's a guy, Michael Evans, who calls that the fifth platonic solid, or the sixth platonic solid. It's a 3-sided solid, but the lines are curved. They're not straight. So it's like a point, and then 3 curved lines that then meet up again at a point.
So it's like a crazy triangle.
And he calls that the geometry of light.
Ooh, so that'd be like
that's the
photon.
What a
photon would
that's
look
the
like?
photon, yeah. 3-sided.
We haven't been able to actually look at a photon.
Yeah,
yet,
I don't know
right?
if we've been able to actually get a geometry on photons because of the nature of them, but it looks like a particle and a wave at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is they still
you
can't figure out if it's a particle or
well,
wave.
if you see people jumping rope, from far away, you can get 2 people to jump in one rope, right? If you spin it right. So if you're looking at it from far away, it might look like 2 circles. But if you look at it from the angle of the person spinning the rope, it looks like 2 spin, or like a waveform.
Like a wave, yeah. And then that's the double slit experiments that also lead to wave, right?
Well, man, the double slit experiment's a whole nother crazy ball of wax. The Copenhagen interpretation of the double slit experiment is completely wrong. I mean, and it led spiritual people to think, aha, we create our own reality because the particle doesn't know what to do until we look at it. And that was incorrect. The reason it was incorrect is that the observer is in the same swimming pool, if you will, as the experiment. In other words, space. And when you make an observation, you are creating waves from your observation that interfere with the waves of the experiment, therefore giving a different pattern. So it's not that the universe is confused and wondering what to do until you look at it and then it manifests. That's
just
incorrect.
playing with you.
It's interaction.
Right, but I'm mentioning this because are a lot of people that have been landed that thing, and then they go around saying, see, we create our own reality. And it's like, yeah, that's half of it. You create your own reality, and reality is creating you. Most importantly, there's a feedback there. You don't just create your own reality, or else we would never meet each other.
That's right.
We'd have different realities.
That's right. You need to, it's almost like you're just a cog, man, but less of a shitty cog when you look at it that way. That's more of like you're just part of that's like the Avatar look at it. You know what I mean? Everything's connected and everything's part of this and that. And I mean, if there's nothing else that I've figured out over the course of 280 episodes of the podcast is that, that seems to be definitely the case in more ways than one.
So what happened with science, though? Because it wasn't always like that. Like it didn't always get so dogmatic. I mean, a lot of the best scientists in the last 300 or 400 years were mystics. Until things when did things turn and get kind of hairy? Like in the early 1900s or the...
Yeah, well, there's a lot of scientists that were secretly mystics, like Newton or somebody, that were doing esoteric things, alchemy and stuff. But I think it really took a turn for the worse when it all started to go towards this field of energy that connects everything, and then they started calling it the ether, right, or the plenum, and then the scientists were starting to freak out. Like it sounded like it was magic. Like, we're now doing mystic. We're not mystics. We're not doing magic, right? So they just said, don't worry about the ether. Because what happened is they measured how much energy density there is in space. And it was so much energy that when they put the number that represented that in their equations, all their equations came to infinity. They're like, what are we going to do? Go out and announce we figured it out. Infinity times infinity is infinity.
Yeah.
And like Wolf Blitzer's like, thanks, Lao Tzu. I thought we were talking about physics, right? Like they can't announce that. So what did they do? They said, okay, we'll say space is really, 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 really full of energy, but it's not infinite. And they rounded off infinity.
It's dark.
Well, infinite makes it tough to sell oil for $1, $100 a barrel.
But I mean, if you round off infinity, that's like an infinite fudge factor and an infinite mistake. And then you're like, okay. And then you come up with your field equations because you said, oh, don't worry about space. That's just background medium. That's like saying don't worry about water in biology. Like, oh yeah, that's just the stuff that the biology happens in, right? Like your DNA won't zip and unzip unless it's perfectly packed by water molecules. The water molecules are the thing that makes it zip and unzip. Yeah. Right. So you can't just ignore the water and you can't just ignore the space. But when they ignored the space and how much energy was in there, then they went about and they got their field equations and they said, okay, here's our standard model of physics. This is tight. We got it figured out. There's a certain amount of mass in the universe. And then they got on their telescopes and they started looking. They're like, wait a minute, we're missing some of the mass. How much are you missing? 95%. So like our best model for the universe, the standard model of physics
95%.
is predicting 5% correctly, and the other 5% is incorrect.
Well,
and
didn't they just throw that in the dark matter or the dark energy?
Yeah,
pile?
and then what did they do? They didn't say, oh, maybe we made a mistake. They said, oh, we'll just invent a new type of matter and a new type of energy out of thin air, and we'll call it dark matter because we can't see it. Now let's spend decades and hundreds of billions of dollars looking for this stuff, and have they found a shred of evidence of it? Maybe, but they also just found a galaxy with no dark matter in it, and they're going, yeah, there maybe was a mistake. And so Nassim Haramein goes, wait, what about that trick that you did where you rounded off the energy in this fabric of the vacuum? That was called renormalization, and it's in this book called Gravitation by Wheeler, Thorne, and Meissner, which is kind of like the Bible of Einstein's field equations. All first-year physics students have to read that textbook. And they pulled this energy out and said, don't worry about that energy, because if we include it, then it looks like everything's infinite, and we don't want to be mystics. And so it got things really confused. It got cemented, and now here we are spending all this time and energy and money looking for dark matter when we should probably be feeding the starving babies on this planet right now. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Especially when it'll probably turn out that dark matter is just another 5%. You're still missing 90.
Or that dark matter is just a misperception of what's actually going on. In other words, when you account for the energy in the space, then there's so much energy density in space that protons are black holes. And when protons are black holes, then they orbit each other at the speed of light, and the amount of gravitational attraction that they would have at that scale of black hole equals exactly within a very small percentage the force that we also invented out of thin air called the strong force that holds the nuclei of atoms together.
Is the weak force invented too?
Well, the weak force is more like nuclear decay, and that's like radiation, and that is maybe part of a natural process of like the shearing that happens at the event horizon of a black hole spinning. Subatomic particles only exist for a very small amount of time, and then they go suck right back into the vacuum, or they become part of a proton. So what I'm saying is that basically the mistake of ignoring the ether and being afraid of this magical thing called the ether was where this all went wrong.
Yeah.
That you know, the ancient wisdom that was encoded started to get totally squashed by modern thinkers, and we got really confused in the recent times. We're discriminating against people based on their color, and all this very strange behavior is coming out of this idea that things can be separate from each other. It's probably the biggest mistake in the history of human consciousness that humans think that it's even possible that something can be completely separate from something else when it's impossible.
Yeah, when it's all butterfly affecting all over the place at all times.
Yeah, there's no boxes. You can't put a box. I mean, like in all the textbooks in physics, it says in a closed system, in a closed system, all the laws of physics are in a closed system. And then there's the asterisk at the bottom that says no such thing has ever been found. There's no closed system. So like, yeah, great guys. Thanks for your theoretical stuff. But like, meanwhile, look what's actually happening. Like,
yeah, look at all the evidence from like Nassim, the stuff he's working on, and guys like Rupert Sheldrake and the morphic resonance and all this stuff that's showing that there is something.
Yeah.
Could you define a closed system as like, say, a video game or something like that as an example of something that's just got its fundamental rules and its limit and its time, and that's it? Is that even a closed system? Or
No
like
way.
Google Earth?
No way. That video game exists in space.
Yeah.
And somebody had to design it, and it's in that hardware, and it's ones and zeros, and that's not closed.
That's right.
It's on the Earth, and it's in the solar system. It's in the galaxy. It's in the universe. It's in the multiverse.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
embedded.
It's like everything on Earth being the result of a human idea, sort of thing. Sort of, it's like it's all comes back to humanity in some way when it's, it all starts as an idea in someone's. It's crazy.
So my dad used to say that anything you can think of is possible, like because you can think of it. Like it starts there. Right?
Yeah.
Everything you can see started there.
Yeah.
And Picasso said everything you can imagine is real.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's just a matter of when.
It's a good one.
So what are you guys doing in Peru then? And like, is it continuing on? This is your second year then? I mean, can you even talk about that at all?
We're going to see the connection between Peru and Egypt, which is the evidence of the ancient technologies that were being used to cut the stones. Because you see the same kind of cutting in the similar kinds of rock. They like look puffy sometimes, like pillows, but they're perfectly aligned and perfectly cut. And there's these little knobs coming off of them sometimes. And so sometimes you're looking at a rock and you're like, where am I? This looks like the same culture that I saw on the other side of the planet. So that's what we're going to go check out.
So you're going to go to Bolivia too as well for Puma Punku and all that.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I always like Puma Punku with the H ones.
Yeah. We're going to hit up all those really great ancient sites all around Lake Titicaca and, in Peru and Bolivia.
Ooh, so you go to that temple where they got that alien face?
I'm
Or
not
there's
sure.
like all the faces, and there's that one. They're like, "That's an alien."
There's some great.
That's the alien that
there's
shot
some
the
great
dinosaurs.
pages on Resonance.is. That's the website for Nassim Haramein. Resonance.is, and there's the itinerary is there for this trip, and day by day it shows all the sites we're going to.
Nice.
So
Can people still sign up for that or anything like that, or is it a closed or an open?
Oh no, it's open.
If people can sign up,
Oh,
pay
yeah.
that's one of those type things. Well,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
might have a few listeners that might get down.
Well,
with
we
that,
do have
actually.
some.
We've already got our friend from the chats. He's already gone. Alan's already
and
gone.
Matt Biller was on our show, who was with
Oh,
you
that's
guys.
right.
Yeah, Matt was with us in Egypt, and Foster Gamble and Kimberly Gamble from Thrive were with us in Egypt as well.
Yeah, we haven't had them on yet, but we've been trying. We'll get there. We're hoping
Yeah,
to
they're
have them
coming
on
out with a
eventually.
new. I think they're
'Cause
coming out with
Thrive
a whole
2
new
comes
thing.
out.
Yeah.
Thrive 2, they're starting to work on it right now. They're doing some really big systems for that. They're going to do some really cool organization, the way that they're going to put it together, the way they're going to fund it, the way they're going to publicize it. And this one's all about solutions, right? The first one was called like, what will it take?
Yeah.
And now this one is, here's what it's going to take.
Yeah.
So
It's nice to see these sorts of things get traction, man. Like 10 years ago, I would have thought it wasn't possible.
yeah, it's happening quick. And thanks to you guys for, pumping the field. You guys are adding torque.
We're trying. Yeah,
we're trying. Yeah,
We're adding torque to the spin of change.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
That's all we
like
can
that.
do. Yeah, it's actually seems to be. That's one of my rants lately. Is that podcasts are it's going to start with podcasts, and I think it'll be video eventually when something replaces YouTube. But it's going to start with these. People are going to start coming out of their basements and offering the last real bit of free speech where you can hear people talk, because they're never going to let you on CNN to tell us what's really going on.
There's
because
not many
they can't
platforms
sell
left.
guns or fucking whatever else they're trying to.
Someday-
drugs. It's drugs, really. They're all
someday
trying to
they
sell
will.
us drugs.
Someday they will, because Nassim's math is going to be proven correct. And then they're going to be like, no way, that guy thought of that in the late 90s, decades before we proved it to be correct. So get that guy on CNN. That's what I want to see.
Let's get that guy in Grimerica first.
Yeah, we could do that. But it would be great to just see him like get more recognition, because
Absolutely.
he's broken a lot of ground and made some insights that were profound and got somewhat buried, I think, by the chatter and the clutter and conflicting information, stuff like that.
So, do you want to mention a little bit about the Resonance and what that like? Because people can go on that and do the course, right? Like,
The Resonance Academy is an.
Okay.
But we can do audio still, yeah?
Yeah, we can keep going on the audio. Yeah.
The Resonance Science Foundation and the Resonance Academy is an online academy. You can sign up and take this delegate program, and it's 6 modules and very in-depth, talking about like changing your worldview and looking at things differently, thinking differently, the history of modern physics and how we got to the model we have now, where we went wrong maybe in that model, and how unified physics fixes that model, and then how that all is tied to ancient cultures, and that ancient civilizations encoded this for thousands of years. And then where is this head? Where are we going to go with this? Like new technologies, new energy development technologies. Because if we could just get energy from the structure of space, because there's so much energy, then we have an infinite amount of energy anywhere. And we don't have to dig into the ground and find some stuff that's been compactified. Or go off planet or anything like that.
Or get off planet, right? Because then technically we could get to space and pull energy out of that instead of trying to...
You don't need to go to space to get, because space is everywhere.
But I might just want to go to Mars or something.
Well, yeah, it does. It means that you have gravity control.
Yeah, so I can just go, like if I want to go to Mars. What about, would that affect light speed?
Well, I think light speed isn't very fast, because if you wanted to go to the other side of the galaxy...
Does Nassim let us break light speed?
Well, that's the thing, is we know that Einstein-Rosen bridges, otherwise known as wormholes, are real. And so they connect all the protons. The protons have tiny little terminuses of flower of life pattern of the PSUs, the Planck spherical units. So it's like a flower of life tiling pattern on the outside of the proton, and each one of those has a little quantum wormhole, 10 to the 40 quantum wormholes connecting to 10 to the 40 other protons, which connect to other protons. That's how the whole thing is talking to itself.
10 to the 40 is into the trillions. It's
way more than that. It's 40 zeros. I don't even know what
that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, and there's 10 to the 60 on the inside. So it's the ratio of information on the inside to the outside that is the gravitational
field. So just to make sure I'm following that basically would mean that I can pop in and pop out wherever I want.
If you figure out how to do that.
Once I figure out how to pop.
Intention.
I mean, what's your cell phone going to look like in 1,000 years?
It's going to be in my brain.
I mean, what did our cell phones look like 10 years ago, right? Compared to what they look now. So in 1,000 years, what does that look like? What if there's a culture that has 1,000,000 years of technological advancement on us?
That's what I say to people that are like, if you're in like high school now and they're asking you what you want to be when you grow up, it probably doesn't exist yet.
Maybe not.
It's, there's a good chance, unless it's like, I don't know what job is around today that's going to look the same in even 15 years.
So we're headed to some fun times once we figure out how to control gravity. Because for a long time there was this mysterious field that we couldn't really access, known as electromagnetism. And then when we figure out how to deal with that, then we were able to put it in our devices. And now I can talk into this little metal thing, and it goes into that thing.
And by tonight it's going to be...
and it encodes the information. And that was because we took an invisible field of information and managed how to, to tap into it and organize it. So if we can do that with gravity, then you can, move from point A to point B a lot easier.
Wow.
And some people are doing it with gravity already. I mean, has Nassim been approached by, a community of elites that are flying around in these UFOs? I hate to broach it, but I mean,
there's stories of people that are working on this kind of stuff. If you go down the rabbit hole far enough, you all come out to the same place, because it's the fundamental reality. And so if you see that there's a guy like Nassim who's describing what you just discovered, then you want to call him and be like, dude, I just worked on, check out this thing I'm working on. Can you advise on what's going on here? And so he's in touch with quite a few people that are doing really cool experiments, but it's a little early still, right? We still have OPEC. And if you're going to take down OPEC with your device, you want to maybe be a little bit careful about how you unveil that and when and all that. But there's too many people, right? They don't have enough hands and mallets to play whack-a-mole with every single free energy inventor out there.
Especially in the age of information, when they can all just spread it and spread it and spread it.
Yeah. So the cat's out of the bag.
50 years ago, it was just like...
Yeah, well, Tesla was the main guy, and they did a fabulous job squashing him and grabbing all of his information, and the military took all that stuff.
Trump got to read it.
And now it's starting to come out, because like now everybody's like, oh yeah, we know who that is now, but it wasn't in my textbooks when I was in high school. They didn't talk about Tesla. They talked about Edison inventing the light bulb, and he didn't.
I think the only
Like-
thing I seen about Tesla in school was just if it was like in a comic book.
Right.
Is he'd be like the evil or whatever, or a Tesla tower in a comic book. I think that was like my first.
Right.
You know what it was? I think it was like in a fucking computer game. There was a Tesla tower. It was like one of those early Warcraft sort of rendition games, and that was the first time I ever heard the name Tesla. Perfect.
Nice. Red alert.
Well, awesome. I think that's probably as good a
Sweet.
place as any to wrap it up. I know you just gave a talk today, and we appreciate you taking. You got another 4-hour talk tomorrow.
Yeah. But it's the infinite universe, and you can talk about it forever.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, thanks for
Absolutely.
thanks for meeting with us and
Yeah, thank you
spending some
guys. I
time with
appreciate
us.
what you're
Yeah.
doing, and
Yeah.
I appreciate your artist too. Doing the artwork. It's cool
Shout
artwork.
out to Nap. Yeah, like I say, I'll email you that tonight.
Yeah, shout out
Absolutely.
to that artist. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no
I'll use the
problem.
same one for this episode.
Yeah, let's
Sweet.
do that. Yeah.
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 All right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so hopefully I'll see some of you folks tomorrow here in Calgary at the TELUS Convention Center, 2 to 6. I just download the whole thing, starting with the early physics all the way to all the way to us in a context of the greater community. Let's just say.
Perfect. And of course, big shout out to our Colorado listeners who are who will have a chance to catch the same presentation that Graham and I
Mercury
will be
Cafe,
at the Mercury Cafe.
2
And
to 6, Sunday, May 6th.
I'll be real surprised if at least Salvatore doesn't come out.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll come out for sure.
Always really amazing people come to these talks.
Yeah.
Anybody who's already onto this and is seeking out this information and shows up at this talk, you're in a room of like minds where you can really explore and say some really amazing stuff that you wouldn't necessarily choose to say in public.
Yep.
In a different audience. People have especially come up to me and tell me some amazing stuff after I'm done with these talks.
Yeah.
Like they almost look to the right and left and they say, I've never told anybody this, and then I just hear some amazing stories.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's been an honor to just be a conduit of this information, because I'm not a physicist. I just saw Nassim and thought, this guy's so onto it, and he deserves to have his information known by more people, and it's hard to convey in a short time, and it takes practice. And so I've done that enough that I can try to distill it in a way that's digestible.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I mean, it
Yeah,
takes
I'm
a
really
special
looking-
type of person to be able to articulate all that, and years of practice, like you said. Do you want to mention your festival as well before we wrap it up?
Sure. I produce an electronic music festival called Sonic Bloom, and it's in Colorado, June 14 to 17. And we do have a bunch of workshops and art and tons of music,
Right
and
on.
a beautiful place, Hummingbird Ranch in southern Colorado.
Maybe we'll send Grambo down this year for a weekend.
Donate to the show.
Yeah, that's it. Nice segue. He finally learns. 282. Yeah, guys, support the show so we can send Graham to Sonic Bloom and do other fun stuff like this. Honestly, we couldn't come out on location with all this stuff. This is all shit that we bought from the donations from listeners from you guys.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
support the show, guys, if you choose to do so. Grimerica.ca/support. And big thanks to Jamie. Big thanks to Graham. Big thanks to Brody. And big thanks to the convention center. And come back anytime.
I will.
We'd love to have Nassim on anytime. Of course, we're almost getting to the point where our reach is big enough to be worth his time, I think.
On Skype would be the way to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, all right. I think that's as good a place to wrap it up.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Shout out to you guys in your new little bonus episode we sent out to you guys again. Support the show, and thanks for listening. And we will see you next week.
Thanks.
No one has ever heard a word as dirty as the word politics. Rhetoric written in some self-proclaimed prophecy. Imaginary lines twisted and tangled with a handshake with a signature and some policy papers behind enemy lines. Tension builds, a cell phone rings, a bomb drops in a city street scene of iPod noise. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. If the digital digital revolution has still got a pulse. We need to revive it and make it a reality. I've hacked into a politician's password and transferred money into several overseas accounts. And as we speak, a supercomputer project is in the works. And if it works, we'll use it to point and click our way to some sort of truth. Either you're in or out, are you game, or is the game over? This must be a glitch in the Matrix. This must be a glitch in the Matrix. A revolutionary dream. It's me versus the machines. Go! Watch out for them laser beams. Climb to the top of the pyramid scheme. Capitol Hill's getting steeper and steeper. Meanwhile, the deck gets deeper and deeper. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. Cause it's gonna take more than hand and eye coordination on your PlayStation. It's gonna take mind elevation. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. A revolutionary dream. It's me versus the machines. Go! Breaking from my routine, I dive into my computer screen. Swimming in a sea of zeros and ones. Trying to put together 2 and 2, but I keep getting lost. Trying to weed through all the lines from the bad guys in the suits and the neckties. Help me find the oracle. She has the answer. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. There must be a glitch in the Matrix. A revolutionary dream. Rage against the machine. Don't get comfortable, free thinkers. Rage against the machine.
Say they like coast to coast, but on demand, raw and uncut interviews, and all without no ads. One says false and one says true, and the rate you sing grows too. Grimerica is here for you. Stories from the listeners, they sent to Graham. He'll read them and be amazed, but Darren may say no. One says red and one says blue, but if it's balls it just won't do. Grimerica